Hello and welcome. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Monday, August 16th, 2010 Informational. We'll start off with a City Council staff report from Deborah A. Owen, our City Clerk, Chief of Council Operations.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. A couple of items for tonight's 7 o'clock agenda, and that is a request by the City Attorney's Office to defer items 6 and 7. Those are under unfinished business. Again, those are items 6 and 7, to defer those to the next council meeting, which would be September 7th, which is a Tuesday. And so your motion tonight to defer would need to be to defer that to September 7th, City Council meeting. And then I know there are folks going to the SMDL policy meetings in the next couple of days. I know that we have carpooled, have a group going up tomorrow, but just to remind those of you who are thinking about attending, I think there's a couple of you that would love to hear from you. And then also the National League of Cities Conference is in Denver this year in December. So I know some of you have spoken to leadership privately about wanting to attend, and we're seeking for one more body. As your policy states, that we want to send a minimum of 2 people to that conference, and we have not done that in recent years. And so if any of you have that time available, please let us know. Thank you.
Any questions for the City Clerk? All right. We'll move into the Mayor is here. Mayor Huther, do you have something for us?
Thank you, Councilor Jensen. Appreciate it. Just kind of give you just a couple of brief updates. Number one, we have put in a request to the governor to remove the stay away from the river deal, and we're hoping that that'll get passed today. Even if it doesn't, we have already are working to remove all the barriers from Falls Park, as well as letting people, again, enjoy the Overlook Cafe, their patio. The fecal coliform levels are looking much, much better, and so we're excited to have that occur. Also, I wanted to let you know, again, it's going to be about 6 to 8 weeks for the permanent fix to go into place in terms of the busted pipe that we have up by the prison. But good things are happening there, and right now the bypass system, or the temporary fix, is working extremely well, which is great. And then again, because of the great weather that we've had, at least for the last four days, the stress on our system is much, much less than certainly what it's been. We have right now, it's normal water usage as people would like, with one exception. We have asked people to continue not to water their lawns in the spirit of trying to dry out this land that we all live in a little bit. The water tables are still extremely high. You still see people sump pumping water from their basements, and we would like to kind of give it a couple more days. And then last but not least, I just wanted to kind of clarify something that I think is still hanging out there a little bit. There were some reports made that the city purposely dumped sewage water or gray water into the Covell Lake. That is indeed not the case. We never have done that. We didn't do it last week. Basically what happened is that when that backup was occurring, it was almost like we had a major drainage pit, and as this water was backing, as this gray matter or this sewage water was backing up, it naturally backed up through some manhole covers into the Covell Lake area. But at no point in time did the city purposely put sewage water into Covell Lake. We're very, very happy that Covell Lake is in very, very good shape right now. But again, I thought we just, in the spirit of cleaning that up or clearing it up, we should at least mention that. But we're excited about the weather, excited about the good work that the Public Works people did last week, as well as the other 1,100 employees. And I will let you know that I'm proud of them, and they did get some sleep this weekend.
Any questions for the Mayor? Okay, we'll move into our reports. Fiscal Committee, or Audit Committee has no report, so Fiscal Committee?
No report.
Land Use Committee?
No report.
Public Services Committee?
No report.
City Council open discussion. Councilor Brown.
I have to take all of you to task because we were all invited to be on Dancing with the Stars, and I got forced into this. And I represented the council well because of my wife. We won the competition. So this was at the Sioux Empire Fair, but you all should have been there. You were all invited. And Mayor, especially you and your lovely wife should have been there.
That's my story. We'll live by it.
All right, thank you, Councilor Brown. Councilor Litz.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I just wanted to bring to this council that the Bosch family, in deciding to keep the downtown Sunshine Store operating, has done this community a great service, and I'd like to thank them publicly for that, because I know it's not easy to run that store down there. They're putting improvements into it, and it does a lot of good in that community for walk-up and for the downtown community and the surrounding area, and I just wanted to bring that up. And then also along the lines of, I've lived by Colville Lake all of my life, and I remember when it was kind of a dead-end lake, and water seldom flowed in and flowed out, and since it's become part of our drainage system, a lot more water has come in there, come out of there, it passes through there, and the quality of that lake water has increased immensely since I was a child. And, even late into the year, I know this is an exceptional year, but I noticed late in the year, the last decade or so, over the last decade, the water quality used to be just tepid green, and it did not smell good. But that has improved, and we've put a lot of money into bank stabilization as well as the drainage, the retention pond system that we've incorporated Colville Lake into part of. So I was glad to, I was wondering about that report. I'd heard that and some other things that I didn't think were quite true. But anyway, I wanted to bring that point up as well, that the city's done well for Colville Lake down there.
Thank you, Councilor Litz. Any other open discussion items? Just want to remind everybody that at 5 o'clock we have the joint council meeting with the Minnehaha County Commission. So those presenters out there, be aware of that timeline. And plus, before that, we have an executive session, I believe. So double duty. If we don't have anything else, we'll start with our presentations. And I believe Public Works is first. Mark Cotter, welcome.
Good afternoon, City Council. Today we'd like to take you through the divisions of Public Works. We have essentially 3 different areas. We have general fund divisions, enterprise fund divisions, as well as internal service fund divisions. Public Works team and their division managers are here with me today. First, starting off with is engineering. Engineering's primary role is to manage the infrastructure needs of the city from a design and construction standpoint, but they also execute the capital plan for all departments of the city. Street and utility maintenance and traffic, as well as storm sewer, is managed by Galen Huber. Electric, light, and power is managed by Mike Barkart. Sanitary landfill is managed by Dave McElroy, and the environmental division is managed by Bob Capel. Water purification is managed by Greg Anderson, and utility billing and metering is managed by Perry Eckhoff. Water reclamation is managed by Trent Lubers, and fleet management is managed by Dean Borkart. You'll see that this year's operating and capital budgets for Public Works total $126 million. That has a breakdown of about $51 million is for the general fund divisions, $69 million is for the enterprise divisions, and $6.5 million, which is fleet, which keeps our rolling stock moving, is for fleets. The key big offsets from last year's total budget of $146 million is primarily in capital. We've got key capital projects that are not happening at landfill because we're getting ready for the next large capital year. But for this year and the near previous years, they've been very capital intensive. Central Maine this year for water reclamation, we've had 3 large capital projects. Next year there's essentially a break on the Central Maine, and then we get ready for large Central Maine projects in 12 and 13. There's a number of projects that, with now Lewis and Clark coming to Sioux Falls, that we've been able to delay for the water system. And one of the things you'll see throughout all of our entire budgets is that we've got reductions in supply and materials. One of the key things there is that in most divisions of Public Works, it's very fuel intensive, and just the cost per gallon for fuel has been reduced significantly from $3.20 down to $2.66 for unleaded, and $3.30 down to $2.60 for diesel. So we're not necessarily using less gallons, we've just got a much better price. Okay, just department overview from first Highways and Streets. And Highways and Streets is the general fund departments of Public Works, made up of our office, Public Works Administration, along with the GIS mapping team. The next is engineering, and then street and utility maintenance. I won't, just some very key things, about 745 centerline miles of roads. With that breakdown, nearly 130 miles of drainage ways, 89 city ponds, 240 signalized intersections, of which about 210 have been changed out to the new high-efficient LED bulbs. We've got 30 more to do now with your passage of the energy reduction grant money, and then those other factors and assets that are in the streets. Some 2010 accomplishments. The 41st Street Bridge project not only got done on time, but got done about 23 days ahead of schedule, and they're still doing cleanup activities out there. Really started the largest segment of the flood control project, which is Phase 2. Microsurface, when we started this year, our intent before we started to manage the project, once we knew the bid prices, we were targeting about 320 blocks, and we've been able to, with very competitive bids, actually increase that to 430, and that program's done for the year. And crack sealing is also another key activity. Those two keys are really where we can spend dollars today and extend the life of pavement. Concrete restoration, we've had some very good projects completed already this year, and we're getting ramped up to do another 2 large fall projects. One will be on 57th Street, one will be on 41st Street. We're in a number of neighborhoods that will total 26 blocks of neighborhood reconstruction, and our asphalt mill and overlay programs had another very good year, and we're wrapping up that program up near Jane Addams School here this week for the year. Okay, highways and streets. Again, when we started, we said that the general fund divisions make up $51 million worth of the Public Works budget, and that's their breakdown, and that includes not only personnel, other operating, but capital. Start to get into some of the trend lines with this year's budget and of what they've been in previous years and what they're currently in this 2011 budget. One of the keys here you'll see is that our personnel costs are about 20% of the budget. We're very supply driven, but we're also very capital driven. And you'll see that we can speak a little bit more to that when we split this graph up into just talk about capital, and then we'll talk about other operating and personnel. Okay, first of all, capital. We've talked about this in the past, that just with the condition of some of our key streets is that we've realigned the capital plan to put more dollars in the next 2 years toward existing streets, which will highlight more dollars in the major street reconstruction program and the maintenance program, which is what we term as the art overlay and seal coating. We also have put significant more dollars, nearly tripled the amount of dollars that we're putting into concrete restoration. But we're also still moving forward with some very good arterial street expansion projects. One of the things you'll see, based on when the original 2010 book was developed, and then with expected reductions in sales tax, Public Works has a hold of about $4 million on the sales tax dollars, And so if you bring that $36.7 million number down to 32, you'll see it's a fairly smooth effect through those 3 years. But we also have reductions from reduced platting fees and just, again, moving forward, trying to estimate where the sales tax dollars will come in. That's where you'll see some of that volatility in those years. The projects that were put on hold, a couple of key ones that we've talked about is Solberg Overpass down by I-229 and 29. That's been reprogrammed into the new book, and so that project was on hold in 10. We've just reprogrammed it completely in 2011. We received most of the dollars that were put on hold. We were able to not necessarily affect the program because we did have very good competitive bids each year. And then 41st and Louise, that study, we're going to do our study in conjunction with the Department of Transportation. They're going to evaluate the 41st Street and I-29 interchange, and then we will cooperatively identify what the best improvements are, not only for the interchange, but also for this intersection, likely some access and capacity enhancements that we can make together. Okay, again, now these are operating personnel and operating budgets for Public Works Administration, along with GIS, engineering, and streets. And just to highlight some changes, number one in the blue, some of the savings that we'll move forward with is enlisting other departments when we're doing specific activities, namely snow removal, is that in the past we've hired about 18 seasonal employees, and one of the things that we're recommending that we're going to do now is that when the event comes, we have very good relationships with the departments of Parks, Fire. Those two help us significantly, as well as all of the departments within the divisions within Public Works, and we'll be able to delay some of those seasonal hires and use existing city staff. One of the offsets there is if a park employee comes over to Public Works to move snow, it reduces their costs because we pick up that salary. On the other side, we only have to have them in the department when the event's here. And so I think it'll be a good cost-saving measure for us to move forward with. Automatic video turning movement counter program. For years, the city has hired 4 counters that actually go out and sit at respective intersections on a daily basis and manually count. We've bought an automated, or we will purchase an automated counting system in 11, which will only then require 1 seasonal employee to actually take it out and mount it. It'll have very accurate counting, and so we'll go from 4 temporary employees down to 1, and also be able to cover more intersections that way. So we're looking forward to that. We actually won't see that cost offset until 2012 because the savings in staff of next year will be offset by the cost of the equipment. Apply anti-icing chemicals to emergency routes only. One of the things that we've seen over time is that we've steadily increased the amount of salt and chemicals that we've used, and one of the things that we had started to do is move into the secondary routes. We're going to recommend to actually take that secondary route back to treating it like a normal street and only really treat the intersections, because that's where safety is really important. In the past, we've not only pre-treated all the emergency routes, but we've been pre-treating all the secondary routes. And at this point, we think that we can save some dollars in the budget, but also deliver a very safe street system. And then last, the other item that's been noted is to apply traffic lane marking paint as needed, either in the spring or the fall, instead of just complete spring and fall treatments. So, some other items in the program that you've got in the relevant statistics is the lane miles. The lane miles have continued to increase over time. We've also increased the amount of maintenance we've done with one of the key things is crack sealing program, as well as now the bridge condition surveys making sure that the bridges are inspected on an every other year basis, and we're maintaining that. Traffic counts. One of the key reasons for the One of the key reasons for the traffic control counts is in advance of a construction program that's being planned. We want to make sure that if there's capacity needs that need to be implemented into that program, they will. They also help us to get a good sense of what the detour traffic may be, and so that's why we have a significant counting program, not only for lanes but for at intersections. So we're looking forward to having the new equipment for the intersections. Efficient snow removal. Again, our plan is to still deliver a good snow removal program within a 48-hour time period. I think many of you have heard us say before, we've also referenced it in the book, that based on the event, if it's, say, a 4-inch snow, we can normally not only plow the emergency routes, but we can plow out all the neighborhoods in about 30 hours. And at this point, we're still recommending that we'll stay with an 18-zone approach and deliver that service. Again, with it's key if we can remove the snow in a timely fashion, that across the city will help us reduce the amount of salt and chemicals that we need. The salt and chemicals are corrosive. We've heard a lot of feedback from neighbors over time that it burns the grass, and so we're trying to balance that with people in Sioux Falls that really want black streets, but to do it as an efficient but cost-effective way as possible. Okay, now to start with enterprise funds, and this graph also includes public parking for all-encompassing enterprise funds for the city, but again, Director Smith will take you through that. As you look throughout, we'll break down each one of these divisions as we move forward today. First is electric, light, and power. Electric, light, and power manages approximately 17,000 street lights. They have nearly 2,500 customers in their service territory. Over 50% of those customers are in a government nature. And again, I think it's important to note that you have to be a municipal electric to be able to buy power from the Western Area Power Administration, which is certainly much more economical cost than buying it right off the grid that we have to buy about half our power from. And so one of the key and largest users of our electrical system is our water plant. And so first, the conduit of having the ability to buy the power off the dams and then to sell it to our largest customer, but one of our key city assets is a huge step that this utility provides. 55% of the power is what we'd consider green power, the hydro, which is from the dams, and the wind power is when Heartland had put on their large wind farm. And so we buy all of our supplemental power that we don't get from WAPA from Heartland Power Administration. Okay, a couple of key accomplishments for this division. The downtown circuit tie is, with the amount of growth that's happened over time and that is expected in the downtown, uptown area, that we're working to get more capacity but also redundancy. Anytime you have a long circuit with several customers, anytime that there's a power outage, if you had more redundancy or a way to isolate those, it's better. It shortens the outage time for those customers. And so that's what that key project was just this year, which is the first bullet. There's been a number of streetlights that were replaced along Grange Avenue. There's been much less in new residential lighting installed this year. Normally, Mike and his team have approached about 400 new lights in residential areas where growth and development is happening. That also is a component of when we build a new street or build an arterial street, when they install the new lights, that number is also included in that 71. And so at least year-to-date right now, we're much less than what we're normal to at this time. And then we're on track. Normally we repair about 2,500 lights that are either inoperable or the bulb is out, and we're trending close to that for the year to date. Okay, electric lights budget, and again, I think our approach was that we wouldn't spend a lot of time on the enterprise funds, just from the standpoint that you just went through detailed rate analysis, but we do want to highlight some of their key financials. Is the electric light and power budget for 2011 is $7.9 million, and with that following breakdown. We see that one of their key costs is the actual purchase of power so they can resell it. So that's why their other operating costs and portion of that pie is so significant. Okay, their key capital projects that are in the current year is to, again, bring some more capacity and redundancy to their existing circuits. And we've highlighted those, and in your capital book there are there's graphics of where those circuits will be improved. Okay, now to go through some of the outcomes that have been established. One of the key things that they can do to make sure that they can deliver power on a daily basis is to keep the tree growth to a minimum, that it doesn't impact the power lines. And so their goal is normally 50% of them get reviewed and trimmed. In 2009, that was almost 75%. The other key is that, and we look at this all across public works, is once there's a capital project that's been identified, is that we realize it's our job to make sure that we execute those dollars, design them and bid them. In 2009, 70% of their capital projects were bid out. 2010, our target is to perform tree trimming around 50% of their overhead primary lines and to complete 95% of their capital programs. Sometimes you'll see that if we're not able to execute all their dollars, we either had very good bids or we might have some right-of-way issues. And so there's always a number of factors that sometimes can hold back the amount of dollars that we actually execute in a capital program, but just wanted to give you a flavor of that. Perform wood pole inspections on 25% of their poles on an annual basis, and then also 2011 to keep the tree trimming program up so we can keep those lines operational. And then some additional outcomes, and again, we've talked a little bit about this. The design and install 459 new streetlights in 2009 was really, lights are one of the last things that go in either a development or a construction project, but we're starting to see their numbers down this year, primarily due to reduced development. In 2010, we still had the target of 400 new streetlights. Likely we won't install that many, and then we're always in position to repair and maintain any number of lights that go out, but the target is that Mike budgets for is about 2,500, and those are the same budgets and targets for 2011. Okay, sanitary landfill.
Mark?
Yes.
Excuse me. Hello. I hate to do this. I want to throw you a little curveball.
Okay.
And I'll ask the other counselors what they think, but there isn't, help me too, if there's the action that the council will take on the enterprise funds, as far as the budget process, is going to be probably pretty minimal. I love the overview and I love all this stuff, but I'm wondering if maybe we'd be better served if we went back just to the streets and highways and your snow removal process, where you started off, and
Okay.
and maybe cover that in detail a little better, because that's where we, I think, have muscle that we can flex and or actions that we can take. I'm just afraid that if we go through all these, Mark, you're going to reiterate a lot of things that we have covered
Okay.
And I think just to serve our time better, I don't want to minimize anything in any of these departments. This is beautiful, the way that those departments run, frankly. Wish everything could run like they do and that. So is there any objections to the rest of the council? If we could go back to Mark's original presentation on the streets, the snow removal process, and where he's going to save money and how we're going to save money and priorities there. Any objections to doing that? Mark, are you okay with that?
I'm fine.
I know you probably had a great speech and everything, but let's go back to that, and if we could, maybe just slow down a little bit and tell us more about how you're going to save money with the snow removal process. I'll start off with that kind of a question, if I could. We're all trying to keep up, and we know we've got a thick packet of stuff to go through, so we hate to ask too many questions, but I'll start with that one.
Okay. All right.
Maybe if you want, we can ask more specific questions to get you started, because I do have some specific questions. In past years, we've always talked about how the de-icer had to be applied before a snow event, and if I heard you correctly, that's not what we're planning to do going forward. And how effective is it going to be if we don't do that, and what are the net impacts of that?
Well, and I'll also draw from Galen Huber to support as we talk through, because if obviously snow removal is one of our key programs, but it's not our only program. The key with the de-icer is that I'd say we've been, if the weather forecast says we're going to get snow, we've normally gone out and pre-treated. Now, chemicals they'll still work if you are out during an event. I think one of the things we were thinking is that typically then we don't have to actually have motor graders go out for the first 1.5 inches because the chemicals are essentially breaking that snow and melting it. There's a couple of key things that we're looking at changing with the chemicals is not only the rate. We've been using a calcium chloride at 12 gallons per ton. We're going to switch to a mag chloride, which is a very good product. A lot of agencies in our area use it. It's less costly. It breaks at a very low temperature, and you also have about 2/3 the dilution rate. So we're going from 12 gallons per ton down to 8. So, which we don't believe is going to see any service change on. So from a volume and a cost standpoint, that's something that Sioux Falls should just see as a more efficient measure. And we've been looking at trying this, and just in talking with some of our partners at the state that use it, we're comfortable actually moving forward with it. I think some of the preemptiveness that we've done, the struggle that we run into is if we preemptively cover everything with salt and chemicals, and then the weather doesn't come, we have a lot of product out there that didn't get used. And honestly, it's that happens, and it happens more than we'd like, but sometimes also the sticking power of it stays if we get another event within 2 or 3 days. So it's not that it's all wasted, it's just we look at it from a standpoint of how can we be as efficient as possible and still deliver streets. Now, I'll be the first one to say our city likes to see black streets, and to some avail, it comes at a fairly high cost, and there are cities that are greater than us that don't have the snow removal budget that we do. And so I say that with somewhat of an openness that I realize that as we move forward, when we're 200,000 and greater, we're going to have to find ways to be more efficient. We've been able to put a lot of product down and deliver black streets for a number of years, but we're just thinking that there may be a smarter way to do it. Galen, do you want to add to that?
Galen Huber, Street Utilities Manager. It's a fair question, and I think that over the years there's been a lot of pressure by the citizens to have those black streets. And like Mark mentioned, at what cost do you provide black streets in the northern Great Plains during the winter months? When we go out and pre-treat, what that basically was doing was ensuring that those streets will always stay wet. Now what's going to happen is as the snow starts coming down, or if it starts to get freezing rain, we're going to go out there and hit it at that time, and there may be just a little bit of a lag in there where it's not going to be necessarily wet. It might be white. And so, again, streets have speed limits on them, but during the wintertime, sometimes you also have to drive the condition of the streets. And so what we're hoping is that people will realize that as we come in there and save taxpayers money by not putting as much chemical down, which is the big experience for me in snow is the chemical, both the salt and the liquid. By reducing that amount, we can still have safe roads out there. It's just that they have to drive the conditions that those roads are until we get them wet again.
Councilor Brown.
Two questions. What are we doing to let citizens know that there will be a different practice so they're aware that their driving needs to change this winter?
Well, one of the things that we're sending out, and that we'll do again, is the brochure that we send out. And what we'll do is we'll revise that this year. Instead of stating that we're going to go out and hit emergencies and secondary routes, it's just going to be emergency routes only. Secondaries are going to be treated as a residential, and if there's slippery areas and we get calls on them, we will go out there and treat them. But we won't go out there and blanket all 327 lane miles of secondary routes. So that's one of the things. The biggest thing that we can do is educate, and that's a good point, is if we can get it out in the brochure, we can get it out on Channel 16, we can get out on our webpage that those areas are going to have less chemical on them. That's great. The other thing is, like Mark said, there's a new product out there, liquid out there, and I hope they don't see a difference on it as far as the emergency route goes. It cuts at the same or lower temperature. It's less corrosive, and you put less liquid down per ton of salt. It's dramatic savings if you can save 5 gallons for every ton. At 16,000 tons of salt, that's a lot of savings that can be incurred through that process. So,
will we be able to track through the police department number of accidents? Last year was the worst winter we've had in memory. I certainly would like to see if this new program results in the same number or a different number of accidents. Is that a possibility to track that through this next winter season?
They have great records during the winter months, and especially around snow events. That were like last year during the Christmas, where we had the 28 inches in 10 days. They got great records on the number of accidents that we had, and certain intersections. There's certain intersections that we have difficulty with. Anything that has any steepness to the road. Those usually have a high incident rate if we don't get out there and get them chemicals put on them. So we certainly can work with the police on tracking that.
And then do the chemicals make up the $1.3 million difference in the snow budget from the current budget?
It's a portion. It's a major portion of it. Employees is another one. What I would do is I would carry a set number of seasonal employees through the winter months. Those were the bodies that I placed behind every steering wheel of piece of equipment that I had. Basically, if I had 1.5 inches or less of snow, the street division could handle everything on the streets, sanding, any blading that we had to do. It's once we got up to that 2 inches, when you start looking at the snow alerts, is where we would have to call in other division employees and other department employees. Now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to carry those seasonal employees. I'm going to rely heavily on existing city employees, full-time staff, to come in and help me with the initial stages like sanding. Normally, if we do a sanding operation, we'll need 40 employees. And so those 40 employees are going to be made up of all of my full-time employees plus other division and other department employees. So I'm not going to be carrying that staff like I normally had through the winter months. I was basically trying to put a street division employee behind every seat. Now I'm not going to do that.
Councilor Litz.
I was trying to ask last year when we had one of our big snow events about salt and stuff, and I know that I did a little bit of reading on it, and I thought that this movement to the new chemical would be a good thing. Number one, for the corrosion factor on cars, driveways, garage floors, our streets, and then number two was that we don't consider a lot is the impact that it has on the environment. As waters go into the river and eventually wind up in the Gulf, I think this product that we're using, the new one, is going to be a lot better. So you're certainly using a lot less of it.
We still have carried over. We have some carryover of some calcium chloride, and we want to test the calcium chloride side by side with this mag chloride product. The data, the research that we've looked at shows that it cuts just as well at low temperatures. That's a big thing for us. If we can get water to run in the gutter pan at 10 degrees or at 0 degrees, that's what we're looking for. That's what we can provide very safe streets, especially the emergency routes. And so we want to test some side by side with some of the remaining calcium chloride and mag chloride at the same time to make sure that it's a good test and to make sure that this product is actually what we really want. The worst thing I want to do is throw something out there that makes it slipperier or worse than what the conditions are out there. So we want to test it, and we're going to test it pretty hard the initial snow that we get here this winter.
I'd be interested in the results of that as that unfolds.
Councilor Brown.
Have you determined what the operating costs are for the proposed Snowgate test and how that will affect the operations budget?
What we're doing right now is we're going to do the same thing. We want it to be a true test. We're going to put 2 sets of snow gates in the same zone as 2 motor graders. Motor graders are my bread and butter of my snow removal. None of them can push snow better than what a motor grader can. And that's how we achieve that less than 30 hours. So when we clean the entire town, 3,000 lane miles, and we do it in less than 30 hours. That's how we get it done. We throw those motor graders out there. We're going to throw them out in the same zone, in the same snow, the same conditions. We're going to test, put down how much fuel they use from the minute they leave the shop to the minute they come to the shop. We're going to measure how fast, how efficient they are at removing the snow and dumping the snow. And we're also going to take a look at the 2 problem areas where North Dakota has with snow gates, and that is they narrow the streets. And if any of you remember last year, we had narrow streets and we had huge issues. The citizens had huge issues with how narrow the streets were. They couldn't even get 2 cars past on some of the central part of the city. And then the other thing is with narrow streets, is plugged inlets. When we got that rain in January, and again when we got in February, we had localized street flooding, and those are huge issues when there's water across the street, and then 2 days later it drops to air temperatures below 20, below 0, and when it turns into ice for us, and then we're out there with icebreakers trying to chop that off. So there's a bunch of parameters that we're going to take a look at. The other thing is how efficient are they at staying operable. A lot of problems in North Dakota is that with the ice that's formed in the gutter pan, those snow gates tend to break easily, or they don't hold up like they should. And when they're down, that motor grader's down until they're fixed because of all the hydraulics that needs to go into them. So we want to give them a true test, and we want to give them a fair test, and we're going to see how they work.
With all due respect, Galen, none of that's news to us. It seems to me the tests have been done in other cities. So I don't know why we're wasting our time and money on that. And my question still is, what are you proposing that we're going to spend on this experiment?
Well, the initial cost of the 2 snow gates is right around $12,000 for both of them.
And that's the capital cost, but the rest of it, what's the total cost going to be?
In North Dakota, will tell you there's more expense involved with having snow gates.
About 40% more, I believe.
Takes longer to do it. No doubt, you and I have our own thoughts, and so does everybody else in the city, on snow gates. And the thing about it is they've never been tested in the city of Sioux Falls. And we will test them in Sioux Falls, and we will finally put it to bed whether they work or they don't work. And so there's no arguments that somebody can't, for the next 10 years, go, we should be having snow gates, we shouldn't have snow gates. We're going to put 2 on, and we'll make sure it's fair, but we'll determine once for all whether or not they work in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Councilor Aguilar.
So does the equipment, is that purchased through $2010 or $2011? See, for the snow gates?
They're purchased in 2010.
And we're purchasing
2.
2? Thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Galen, did you find snow gates that actually work on the motor graders? I could never find ones that would fit on anything but a truck, a plow truck.
Correct. They work only on the motor graders, so you can't put them on our one-way sanders.
They only work on the motor graders, not
Right.
on the sander trucks?
Correct.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
If I could add one comment on the Snowgate issue. In the end, please have a number that we can talk to people about that says, if we want snow gates to be done with throughout the whole city, and even maybe to probably provide a better service to all those citizens in the city, we need to know what that cost is going to be. So, in the end, help us know that number, because I can understand that probably a better service, less snow in people's driveway is better service, but at a cost. And we need to know what that number is, so that if the public says, we want that, we all want snow gates in front of our house, they know what that price is going to be, and we know what that price is going to be. You'll know, and we can budget that in if that's what people so desire. We just help us know the total number, not just this one experiment number, but a total year budget.
Yeah.
If that's possible. Councilor Litz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Snowgate just sums it up about this issue.
Well, yes, any other questions?
Just a question, because they weren't in the 2010 budget, how does that work?
They're out of Fleet operating the purchase. Fleet buys all my equipment for me, and Fleet purchased those 2 snow gates for me for this year.
So it'd be safe to say that this council has nothing to say about whether you do or don't test snow gates. Would that be fair?
You'll absolutely have everything to say about snow gates. We'll test them this year, and you're going to be able to see what they're actually going to do. You know, to give you an example, Jamestown, North Dakota, on January 5th, sent out a memo to all the citizens saying they're taking their snow gates off because they're so inefficient and they broke down. They couldn't get the snow off the street on a timely basis, so they took yours off. There's data that provides that. Again, I think people want to see a test. People want to see if it works in Sioux Falls. You say it doesn't work here. There's been other cities that have tried them, and now they're in the surplus pile because they haven't worked for them. I think what people want in Sioux Falls is for us to try them and see if they work, and finally put it to bed, whether or not they're going to work or not work. And I'm going to give them a true test to see if they work or not, compared to just regular motor graders. And the whole aspect of narrowing streets and having inlets plugged just worries me a lot, because that was huge for me last year. One of my biggest headaches was narrow streets, snow in front of mailboxes, mail when the Postal Service wouldn't deliver their mail, and then the flooding that we had in January and February, and then again later in the spring because of all the inlets were plugged. That worries me a lot.
Galen, you're the man on this job. I believe that. It's just I don't want to cover something that we don't have anything to really say about. I guess, frankly, if that ship has sailed, let's move on to something else that we can redirect or direct further. But I know you'll do the study, and we'll find out once and for all. But that's just not an item for us to, I guess, decide.
But
Councilor
then,
Eppenbach.
Councilor Jameson, what you just said to Mark Cotter was, we're not going to look at the fleet presentation, and we just now are saying that the fleet is the one that took, help me understand this. The fleet is buying the snow gates that the council did not approve to purchase. But now we're saying we're not going to look at the fleet presentation because we don't have anything to say about it, or we don't have enough time, or whatever.
No, we can cover anything we want. It's just that I thought we would jump back to.
I think I might be able to help. I think the enterprise funds are dollars that the council doesn't appropriate. It's not a part of your budget approval. I know with the CIP project last year, there was an amendment by a council member, and it wasn't ever adopted to move forward to put snow gates in the capital project. Historically, my guess is that the funds used to buy this were not CIP dollars.
It's essentially a small attachment, and so they're each like $5,800 a piece. And the OSEP, I believe, and we can have Gene speak to this, is when it's $7,500 or greater. And so there's a number of things that get purchased throughout the year to keep the city moving, and doesn't hit that threshold is one of the keys.
And if I could, just for council, OSEP is second penny. That is CIP dollars. I know some of you know that, but just so that you all know that to follow this, because it gets a little confusing, and maybe for the public as well. I just wanted to kind of, if I could, fill in the gaps a little bit. So.
Let's move on, maybe other than snow gates. Thank you. Any other questions for Mark? Just at hand here. Mark, you're sharing the staff with other departments. And when these, how much of a cost savings did you kind of associate with that? I know you said there was a savings, but...
With the offset from the seasonal employees to there, we'll get it for you here.
And/or, Mark, is there any other portions that you should, feel inclined to share further with us on the savings that you're trying to incorporate in your department?
Well, I think, one of the key things is that you realize the original 2010 had cost of living, had all those features in there, and so that's one of the key correction factors. We're obviously looking very close at overtime and part-time services. Those are some of the key costs that can be controlled and are being controlled. I do think that there's a number of items that if the revenue's not there, the program's not there, and so that's when you see some of the reductions in highways and streets, for example, in platting fees. That's where you see the offset in the capital program, and so we kind of have to follow this through to be able to answer all your questions, because if the corresponding revenue is not there, the corresponding expense isn't there. So, again, we do what we can to maximize the dollars that we have each year. Actually, sales tax for year over year for Public Works from last year's book of 2010 to 2014, or this year's book of 2011 to 2015. In 2011, we're up about $1 million. And that $1 million is being directed to increase concrete rehabilitation, and we've also done an offset from arterial street expansion to major street reconstruction. So overall, I think one of the key things is in the capital books that you received, those fold-out pages in the back, 2011, from last year's book to this year's book, is up. I think you'll also see some reductions in our street maintenance program, but the other offsetting piece is that we're doing some of our streets that we spent so much time on last winter, which is Minnesota, Russell, Cleveland, Grange. Those streets, 10th and Cliff, those streets we put so much effort in, and the offsetting effect is we've done a thick overlay, or will do a thick overlay this year, and then we're programming those for construction. So just know that if you see a corresponding offset in our general fund dollars, it may be offset in the capital investment dollars, and that's what you'll see for Public Works.
Councilor Brown.
Mark, help me understand the numbers, because in looking at the 2010 to 14 book and the 2011 to 15 book, much has been made about increased focus on infrastructure and highways and streets, but yet the percentages don't tell that story. That's what I don't understand. Last year's CIP book, 66% was going to infrastructure. This year, 64%. Highways and streets, last year's book, 44.5%. This year's 38.9%. The 5-year average of sales tax CIP for highways and streets, last year's book, 69%. This year, 68%. So I don't understand those numbers when we talk about increasing infrastructure and highway and street funding when it doesn't correspond with the two books.
Well, I think one of the keys with any plan is you have to not only look at the 5-year, but also look at the actual year that will be acted on. And 2011, again, on those fold-out sheets, has more sales tax funding directed toward streets than the previous book did.
Show me specifically where you're at.
In the back.
In the CIP?
In the CIP fold-outs.
But when you're looking at the total picture of the CIP, we're spending less on infrastructure and highways and streets under this new CIP book.
Well, I think, and again, that's a direct correlation of any time you reanalyze the revenue sources. If the revenue sources go down, the expenses go down as well. And so, and that's what's occurred just with trying to, we've all tried to find a balance of where growth and development's at and where some of these predicted revenue sources will be, whether it's on first penny or second penny. And, you know, these are predictions based on what we hope that we're going to see as a floor. And so that's what I would share with that. But again, this sheet that's the summary in the back, I think is probably one of the better areas that you can see. And then the offset, too, on the reduction from other departments in the capital plan. You know, they've had some significant reductions. So
I'm looking at, for example, the overlay program is down by $500,000. Concrete repair replacement is up $1 million. Arterial street construction, I believe that number is down. There are a number of areas that are down. So where is the big increase that I keep hearing about?
well, the big increase is the overlay and seal coating program. That was just essentially when we prioritized the projects, instead of actually cutting a project because we've seen such very good bids, there was a bid rescission taken across all the projects of a certain percentage. But essentially, we still expect to, if bidding still stays like it is, we'll still be able to execute the program with those same dollars. Now, concrete overlay, that was $850,000. Now that's at $1.9 million. That's a significant increase. The other big increase is major street reconstruction program. That's the offset of a new project, a new pooled project that has new funding in it for 2011 of $4 million. And that offset essentially would come from the expansion program, because that's, we're in the next 2 years making that shift to invest more into the streets that we currently have as opposed to expanding. We've got a number of streets that have been expanded and we're waiting for development. And so I think it's certainly fair to actually make that offset in the near term and then balance it out as the plan develops now, if that helps. And then the rest of them I would say are fairly straightforward of what we've done in the past, or very close.
Mark, if I could add the survey that was done back in 09, 08, the lowest mark that we got, or the lowest mark that the city received, was on street repair.
Mm-hmm.
And this recent nearly $2 million, I believe it was, that the mayor reallocated to repairs, really, that's got to go a long way in addressing that issue, which I think we can all agree on is important, because it was our lowest mark.
Right.
Now, that's in 10, right? That's 2010 dollars and actions. Going forward, how do you see us improving that mark, that low score that we received on the survey?
Well, I think we've got some contributing factors. Not only from we've got to invest into some of these core streets, and we're doing that, and I think you'll see that once we're able to leverage some of the state dollars, so West, Russell, North Cliff get reconstructed in the next 3-year term. You'll see 3 significant streets that people use every day. This year, 41st Street, Minnesota Avenue, 10th and Cliff. Those are short-term projects till we can actually go out and do a full reconstruction. But there'll be a focus for at least 2 more years so we can get some of these key intersections done. And then one of the keys is to keep the maintenance program at where it needs to be with concrete repair, mill and overlay, because that's where we want to spend good money on good streets so they last longer. So it's not a one-bullet answer. It's multi-level. It also has some effect on the amount of salt and chemicals we use. I mean, when we use as much salt and chemicals as we do, we can almost create 100 freeze-thaw cycles inside a joint any given winter, because once we break that ice and then it refreezes, once it leaches out, it's a cost of doing business with both our programs. So again, I think we feel good about where the asphalt program is. We recognize that we lost a lot of life in our concrete streets this last winter. It was also a very wet fall prior, so when that freeze-thaw cycle began, you really started to see any patch material that we had in our streets get lifted, but then it just wasn't very conducive to actually patching for a number of months. We're lucky that we had one of our Begala machines that was running. But again, it's a multi-level approach. It needs to start with more dollars in the program, not only in 10, but strong dollars in 11 and 12, so that some of these streets that see over 30,000 vehicles a day, the people that drive through and across Sioux Falls will see a noticeable difference. And they won't see a noticeable difference if we don't reconstruct a 10th and Cliff, if we don't reconstruct West, Russell, North Cliff, and do significant joint and spall repair projects on 41st Street and some of those other key roads. And so, anyway.
Just help me on the overlay that's going to occur on Minnesota Avenue, for instance. How long will that give us till we have to really go in there or is there a timeline with the underlying utilities that need to be replaced in a future date that you're trying to time those up better? Or tell me, if you could, just real briefly.
Right. That's one of the keys. One of the key water mains that comes out of the water plant runs down Minnesota Avenue. And we'd like to get some redundancy on that because it is really the backbone water main. And we've also have an old water main under that street. So we are giving this asphalt overlay will give us about 2 years so we can start to ramp up dollars of user fees in the water fund, but also address some of the just surface conditions that are out there today. When you overlay a concrete street, for example, Louise Avenue from 49th to 41st, that was in relatively good shape and the joints were fixed just a few years prior. We didn't think it was a good measure to actually go out and fix the joints in Minnesota Avenue. It's a very old street, but we realized that traveling public shouldn't have to drive over that condition of a road for 3 more years before we do something besides just patching it. So that's why we're going to patch the areas. We're going to do a thick overlay of 2 inches, and likely that'll get us through the reconstruction, which is going to take us about 3 years. We're going to start the design next year and begin to reconstruct Minnesota Avenue from the north to the south, starting in 12.
Mark?
Councilor Rolfing.
Mark? I've been looking in here. Where's the 49th Street extension in this? I haven't seen it in here.
In the book, it's because, Councilors, because we still have a significant amount of right-of-way to purchase out there, and when we've got that much right-of-way to purchase, we've made good progress on both ends, and now from essentially Duluth to West, that's where our next focus will be, and then we've essentially have all the right-of-way from West over to Western. And so until we have a better sense of what that on how that right-of-way will progress, namely with the tank farm and some of those other property owners, I wouldn't feel comfortable programming it in for a year. But once we get to that point, that's one of those key projects that, we have some flexibility in the capital plan to move it in. Obviously, it was a key project that was identified to take load off 41st Street.
But haven't we started on that project?
We have started on the project at the first 2 blocks off Minnesota Avenue. And so giving it the impetus of...
So it's in 2010s?
It's in 2010's capital program just for those 2 blocks.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do anything then in 2011 on it?
No, just continue to work on procuring right-of-way.
And no money's been budgeted for, you got that money in other places for the land, right?
That's right.
Got it.
That's right.
Councilor Brown?
Rex raises a good point. In past CIPs, we've been able to see specifically what projects were going to be there, but in this year, it's in a pooled street project. So how do we as a council know which streets will be prioritized, Mark?
Well, I can take you to that with I think one of the key, if you turn to, do you have this book with you?
That's on the map, that map deal that you got?
All right, do you have your 2011 and 15? And if you go to engineering, and I'll get you the page. Probably starting with 31, but I'll take you to 33, which is Major Street Reconstruction Program. And Councilor Brown, is that the list that you're referring to? And I realize in past CIPs you haven't seen what some of those projects are, but we have identified those here of what we believe needs to be constructed over the next 5-year period.
But when do you prioritize that?
That's actually, since this was the draft book, we're going to reprioritize. They've been prioritized, they're just not in the text. And so we'll change that text so you can see from the first one that would likely be the first priority all the way through the last priority. So that's
they're
one thing we've
ranked
seen in the
order
draft.
there.
They're not ranked in order here. But we'll, in the final book, we'll provide that. We can actually send that out to you of what we believe the priority should be as a part of this budget process.
Does that 19 or almost 20 million, you're estimating it could cover all those projects?
No. One of the things that we normally do, for example, 14th Street, 57th Street, and 10th Street, that's in the third line. We do believe that we'll be able to accomplish that next year, primarily in 11. But then we've got some other projects, like right next to that, 26th Street, that we know that we can either do a 3-phase project or do it all as one. But one of the key bottlenecks in our city is 26th Street by Southeastern. But we can do some things that can alleviate that. So we put that street project in there. But one of our first goals may be just to put a new right turn lane in from eastbound to southbound. So I realize that there's a lot of detail that sometimes does not show up in these project descriptions, but we can certainly, we'll write them out in text, what we believe the priority is, and we can even forecast is what we intend to do by year.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mark, I know we've jumped around a little bit on you and attacked you from all sides, but maybe you feel a little disshuffled, but is there something else that you want to share with us that maybe you don't feel like we've quite understood or got? I don't want to rush you off here. I want to get...
I think that our key program is it's a good investment into the core roads in the near term, and then we balance out again when we expect the growth and development to be coming back. We also expect to ramp up those platting fee revenues, which can accelerate some of those programs like the arterial street expansion projects. But until that point happens, we'll do our best to balance both sides. But there are some key bottlenecks that are happening in our city that we can make minor improvements, whether it's surface or capacity at intersections, that people will see immediate results. And so that's where I think if you have questions, we'd like to hear about them. If you've heard from a constituent on a particular intersection or a roadway, certainly don't hold back. We're all ears, and we want to make sure that we can address the highest priority projects, likely also with the most vehicle traffic that we can. But I think from that standpoint, with the level of detail that we go through each year with the enterprise funds, I think we feel confident that you have confidence in those enterprise funds. So outside of that, again, we've got some time before the budget's acted on. If you have any questions for Public Works, we can certainly come back to answer them.
Is fleet, is there anything in fleet that we think we should know about?
I think, again, in your capital book, you'll see the pieces of equipment. Essentially, Dean Borkart, he and his team, keep almost 400 pieces of rolling stock ready to go for Public Works. Some of the things that we've done for cost-saving measures is if we would have a vehicle that we believe we normally like to replace on a 12-year cycle, we might have switched that to a 13, just again to, if we're maintaining them very well, it can save us some dollars in the near term and just get more life out of those vehicles. Probably a service increase that you're seeing the capital dollars go in this year is we're building the fourth fueling site. It's at the landfill. We're also building the site so we can fuel our own bulk trucks, so we don't have to get separate bids on bulk truck delivery, because a lot of our large equipment, like at the landfill, that's two separate prices, so there's a cost-saving measure there. And there's also about 21 other government entities that use the fueling sites besides the City of Sioux Falls. So outside of that, that's, I guess, what I would add.
Councilor Intiman, did you have something?
The pothole repairs, are you still doing that throughout the city when something comes up?
We are, and I think just with the events of the last 2 weeks, we've had to leverage a lot of staff from almost every division of Public Works. But we'll get back to those activities. We also, when we're doing our microsurfacing program or a mill and overlay program, that takes some of those resources. But now that microsurfacing's complete, mill and overlay is nearly complete, Galen will have some of those resources to go back and address them. Again, some of our key streets that he continues to have to put a lot of effort into is Minnesota Avenue and Russell Street, and both of them start this week. And so you'll see multiple phases because we're also going to maintain traffic.
Just a quick comment on that. We are actually using a new material down on Minnesota Avenue. The overlay comes up to 18th. From 18th Street to 22nd Street is where we're working right now. It's a Tech Creek product. The state has some. We went out and took a look. The state used it about 8 years ago, and the patch is just doing great after 8 years. We're using that same product on Minnesota Avenue. We're going to go from 18th all the way down to the interstate, turn the corner on 41st Street, and go down 41st Street towards Kiwanis with it. It is a little bit labor intensive. Where the spalded out joints are and all the diamonds are, we're going in and cutting that out so we have a nice clean surface. This material is going in at about 350 degrees into the hole. We can only do one lift at a time. We have to do two lifts, so it takes a little bit of time to do it. But if you drive the outside lanes of Minnesota between 18th and 22nd, you see this grayish material. That's the new product that we're putting down. We think it's going to work really well on that concrete and stay in there. If we can get what the state has gotten out of their product, it's going to be. I'm really have hope for that. We also have an asphalt mastic that we're using, same type of product that we're putting down, especially where the thermal cracks are. We did it on 57th Street, just west of Minnesota Avenue. We tried it out, and we really like that. And we're gonna do some of that where you constantly get the railroad effect because of the thermal cracks. We can go and bridge across that, and it actually has a really nice transition to it. And again, Mark hit it on it. Preventative maintenance, preventative maintenance, preventative maintenance. If I get water to run during the wintertime and there isn't a hole in that street, I don't get a pothole. So if I can keep the streets sealed with overlay, microsurfacing, crack sealing, and now with this Tech Creek product, when I do go out there to turn snow and ice to water in the wintertime, it runs in the gutter pan and doesn't go down underneath and get into the roadbed and then blow it all out for me.
Right, good. Councilor Brown, did you have something?
No, I didn't.
Councilor Erpenbach.
I just wanted to say how fun it is to watch Galen get excited about the streets. Thank you for your service and for the amount of work you put in for us. We appreciate it.
Councilor Litz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may be for Galen as well there. I've noticed, the pothole seems to be stabilized, and we're gaining on that, but a new phenomenon that I've noticed in some residential areas, and I've noticed 4 of them, is where right by a manhole where there's a dip in the street now, and it seems like the manholes, I don't know, could you explain what's going on when that happens and how you're repairing that? I think water's coming out of the manhole at the sleeve where it is, and it's washing out, but I've noticed 4 of them. If I've noticed 4 of them, there's got to be more of them in the city.
Normally when we get a call and we go out and take a look at that, we get water reclamation. Trent's guys will come out and camera those for us. Sometimes it's a joint that is separated underneath from the box or within, or there's a hole in there. And usually that, when water's not in the pipe, it's outside the pipe, it creates a void, and then you can get some settlement down in the street. So the first thing we do is camera it to see if there's an issue. Sometimes it's just It just is a phenomena where you get a little bit of a material displaced. There's nothing wrong with the pipe, and then we have to cut it out and redo it. But definitely, we've seen a lot of that, and it could be to the really wet conditions that we have this year. There's a lot of pressure in that soil, subsurface soil area right now with all that moisture in there, and it's putting a lot of pressure on those joints. So anytime we see settlement, the first thing we have to do is make sure that it's not a failure underground. If it is, then we need to dig it out and replace it. But yeah, we are seeing some of those this year.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Entenmann.
Just one more comment. First of all, Mark, thank you very much, and I know there's a couple of other gentlemen out here that worked really, really hard when we had that emergency dealing with sanitary sewer here. Trent, Galen, and Chad, you and your teams did a fantastic job, and I know we recognized people at a previous council meeting the same way. And again, I'd like to thank you. I think the citizens of Sioux Falls, if they could see how you guys were working out in the field, I think it was pretty impressive. And I'd like to thank you for the service, and I think we've got a great team here, Mark. Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
I do have another question on arterial streets. For as long as I've been on the City Council, we've talked about a backlog of $83 million. That number's changed?
Yeah, I'd say that number's changed. Some of that is somewhat time-sensitive. Way back when, not too far back, but when that number was established, we looked at a number of different types of streets that could either have a rural section, half an arterial section, or a full. Some of those assumptions have changed, but I think the key thing that's changed is just the pace of development. We've got land that's platted, but very little activity. And so I think one of the key things that I'd share is that a significant investment's being made down by 69th and Southeastern. And anytime we cross the railroad tracks like that, and then in those soil conditions, that takes a lot of resources. But that street's going to, carry and open up a significant amount of development, and the other streets that were done in the last 2 years. And so I think there was one of the key things with that is not only that those streets on there are likely very good streets to be doing, but we also have to time it with development. In some of those areas, development is stopped.
So what is that backlog number today?
I wouldn't speculate for you. I'd have to look at some of the time.
Half? 40 million? 20 million?
Oh, I would expect that if it was 81 million and we've probably completed about 5 of those key roads, I would still expect that it's greater than 50. But again, the timing of when is the best time to actually do that road, that we may have platted property close there, but if they've got access and we start to see this maturity rate pick up, then we know we have to start to balance that back out in the CIP. So, but when the alternative financing of infrastructure actually identified that $81 million, this city was developing at a pace that it hadn't seen, and we were also looking for revenue sources that we hadn't had before. Our revenue sources are down that were identified, and so is development. So as I drive the outskirts of Sioux Falls, there are good streets to do when the timing's right. So,
Councilor Erpenbach.
Before you go, Mark, the flip side of that then is the Central District, where so many of our core streets are, our core infrastructure is. We continue to have folks in, and we didn't really get into water and water rec, but I know that we've also been dealing with a massive amount of water. Would you talk just a little bit about, because I'm hearing this as concerns from constituents, talk a little bit about how we plan for and how we prepare for updating the core infrastructures. We still have, neighbors in the Central District who probably still have water in their basements today, even though we haven't had rain in several days. We still have people who are seeing water running over curbs, not now, but have in this, even though we've had all the massive amount of work that the city has done to that area. Can you talk about that planning process and how it is that we decide what's next for that core infrastructure for me?
Okay. I would say that, everything starts with, once we start to identify an area that needs to be improved, we look at all the utilities, and including storm sewer. But in the past, as we know, there was significant amount of drainage studies wrote to look at when you when you bring an old core neighborhood up to standards, likely those initial standards that they were built at are woefully lacking, or could be. And so a drainage study is performed, and then you start to look at the best way to sequence that work. And that's essentially what was done with the $40 million, is that those plans were carried out. Now, I think the other thing we need to be conscious of is that the piping system is only for a 5-year event. We still heavily rely on the street system all the way out to the sidewalks to carry stormwater and to route it down the streets. And if it's a greater than a 5-year event, then it's going to travel on the top of the streets. But our drainage team certainly looks at those, and if there's spot incidents that need to be looked at, likely we can make improvements to that if it's not a larger multi-year project. But I would say that from at least what we've seen with the investment that was made of the $40 million, a lot of those areas that were prone have seen minimal issues over an extremely wet summer.
Good, thank you. The other question I would have then is, and there will be one that I'm going to pass along to your staff that is of particular concern based on that topic. The other thing I want to ask you about is how, when we're looking at in the core areas, we look at the industrial is not the right word, but the areas, the corporate areas in the center of the city that are growing, they're building more roof space, they're building more parking space, less permeable ground is what we're getting out of it. Talk about, for us and for the people watching, talk about how you plan that and how you help those corporations plan for that non-permeable space that they're creating.
Well, there's certainly a set of guidelines, and one of the key things that came out at those public meetings back in 2004 is that some of those internal redevelopment issues may have caused some concerns in the neighborhoods. If a particular business comes in and wants to do a redevelopment, they have to meet the design standards of today, which requires a list of items, whether it's for BMPs or stormwater retention. Sometimes you can see them. The one that's being created right now at Avera's campus is very visual. Some of them you can't see because there's underground systems that can be used very well. And so I guess I would just stress that if someone has a concern, if they can't physically see that there's a stormwater retention project going in, it may be because it's underground, but they can always call our office and we can pull a site plan. I think one of the best ones that's out of sight, out of mind is under Edison Field. Mm-hmm. And that's a large underground piping system. It's almost 2 miles of 8-foot diameter pipe that is a system underneath there for closed detention pond. So anyway, there's a list of requirements, and that's an area that Andy Berg and our engineering office manage as well.
Good. I appreciate that. I realize it's a tangent from the budget, but at the same time, folks are watching us spending their money, and they want to understand how that system works. So I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
I think just one other item, since you brought up storm drainage, is another key activity that the street department does each year, if we get what I'd consider a normal winter, is that they remove about 15 to 20,000 tons of silt either out of drainage ways, the river, or some of these city-owned ponds. And that's a key maintenance activity that certainly takes revenue to fund that program, but it's so those systems can be at full capacity when we have summers like this with the amount of wet rain that we've had. So another key program that doesn't necessarily take a lot of dollars, but it's very important that we get done. And so we've got some key drainage systems that will be cleaned this winter as a result of that. The key is that we like to wait for the ground to freeze, so when we go in with large equipment, we don't destroy the grass.
Councilor Brown.
I promise I'll be quick, but bringing that up reminded me that, are we behind on our maintenance of those waterways? Because I had someone approach me this weekend concerned about that because they hadn't, the cattails and things were filling in, and they hadn't seen the city coming to clean them out in more than 5 years.
We have a schedule, and it ranges anywhere from 5 to a 10-year program based on the amount of flow. that comes into an area. Roosevelt Channel is another big channel that moves a lot of water on the west side. That's identified for this year. And so, again, I couldn't probably speak specifically to a drainage
I'll
way.
be getting an email. I'll forward it to you.
Okay. But, again, we also realize that a nearby construction project may have moved a lot of silt down a drainage way that we have to change that schedule. It's not in concrete. We can modify if we see either something damming up and just not flowing water. We can direct Galen screws to that. So, well, on behalf of Public Works, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Don, come on up. Don, we've got you under the gun, but how you feeling? How much time do you need, you think?
How much time do you want to allot me? I can right-size it.
Can you do it in less than 20 minutes?
Oh, yeah. 15, how's that?
All right, go.
All right. Get our slides caught up here. Don Kearney with Parks and Recreation. Appreciate the opportunity to present our operating budget to you this year. Before I get started, though, I'd like to thank our key staff that really do a lot of the heavy lifting on putting our budget together. Dave Fisher, Kelby Maris, Tori Miedema, Alicia Luther was actively involved, as well as Scott Yunke and Susie Gary. The department overview. As a general rule, we have 2,500 acres of parkland, and spread out over 72 different developed parks. We also have provide grounds maintenance on over 1,700 acres of public property, including right-of-way, medians, BMPs, wastewater treatment plants, lift stations, libraries, etc. Across those 2,500 acres, we have $150 million in fixed assets that require regular maintenance and upkeep. And then obviously we're also responsible for the urban forest and the enforcement of the vegetation ordinance. We also, through contractual agreements, we're involved in the operation of 3 municipal golf courses, the zoo, and municipal band, to name a few. And then also we partner is primarily a facility provider for 32 different athletic associations in the community. The next slide. One of the things that we're pretty proud of when we did the National Citizen Survey in 2009, when people were asked what makes Sioux Falls a great place to live, 66% said Parks and Recreation. We were actually kind of surprised by that response rate, and it was the number one reason people listed it. And largely that's a tribute to the mayors and city councils that have come before us in their investment in the park system. Online registration is another accomplishment. We've really gone full swing into online registration. We established a target at 60% in 2010. Year-to-date so far, we're at 80%, and so we're tracking very well there. The other thing, obviously, we spent a lot of time on, as well as other departments, are adjusting our department operations to align with the available resources that we have in the state of the current economy. Participation in department-sponsored athletic programs, we continue to see those numbers climb. We average about 6% a year in growth at a time when our population normally increases at 2 to 3%. And so over the last several years, over the 5-year periods, we've noticed about a 30% increase, and that's been pretty consistent over the last several years. And as just a general note, as Sioux Falls grows, so too do our programs and our participation in our programs. And I guess the other thing I'd like to point out as a part of that is that we realize that the partnerships that we have with the school districts, Sioux Falls, Harrisburg, Brandon, are extremely important for us to be able to provide facilities to be able to continue to grow those programs. The community centers that we've constructed over the last 10 or 15 years, we would not be able to grow these programs without those facilities. And so it just reminds us of how important that partnership is. Recently, we worked out an agreement with R.C. Sweetman family to donate land along the river going out towards Great Bear. And as a result of that, we did get 14 acres of real estate along the river. It's basically a 275-foot swath for about 3/4 of a mile in length that will allow us to continue to be able to build trails in Sioux Falls. Something we hear a lot of out in the community is that when are you going to build more trails? They're very excited about our plans for that particular project. The other thing I'd like to mention is that the planning department was instrumental in achieving the Bicycle Friendly Award, and I just wanted to also comment, and you probably all hear it as well, is that to have that bike trail system where you can ride 20 miles without ever crossing the city street on a paved surface is something that we hear always, and we look forward to more pedestrian improvements and bicycle-friendly improvements in the community as a result of some of our additional trail planning. And then obviously we've talked about accreditation and how that's made our department better. This slide shows that where we're investing the $19.3 million in 2011 as proposed. Personnel makes up 7.6% of that. 5.2 is made up of other operating, and capital is $6.6 million of the total. While other personnel and other operating portions of our budgets remain relatively flat over the past 4 years, you'll notice a steady decline in the capital over the last 4 years. And that's largely due to the quality of life bonds. We have been the beneficiaries of some very good capital years, the junior football complex, the zoo improvements, Harmadon Park. I mean, there's been a lot of major projects that the department's benefited from, and that's largely a reflection in that particular trend line. In 2011, our focus is really on improving existing facilities. However, it will also allow us to build a new restroom and a playground near the new Farmers Market shelter in Falls Park North, and then would also provide an additional parking lot on the east side of Phillips Avenue in Falls Park West, as we call it, just north of our existing office building. Despite entering kind of the crux of the economic recession, the Arboretum Society did launch a capital campaign. They were successful in raising over $300,000 to match the city's dollars to begin Phase 1 of the Arboretum in this current year, which will be bid next month. But know that they fully anticipate that they'll also be able to launch Phase 2 next year at this time. The other thing I'd mention, it was brought up during our capital program, and we don't have dollars in 2011 and 2012 for land acquisition, but our current balance in that fund that we've carried forward from previous years is over $500,000, and we plan to rely on that going forward in case we do have additional land acquisitions materialize. Land acquisitions are a little, it seems like over a course of 3 months you'll get several that come in and you've got willing sellers, and then you go 9 or 10 months and you won't get a one to move. And obviously it's a negotiation process, and timing is everything, it seems like a lot of times, and so I didn't want to point that out. We normally like to have $200,000 a year, much like Mark does in Public Works through his right-of-way program, to take advantage of those opportune acquisitions. The other thing I'd like to share with you is that we have a project in our 5-year plan, actually in 2011, as proposed to use the Big Sioux River Environmental Trust Fund monies that are out there. Back in 1996, a fund was established as a result of fines paid by Morels for discharges into the river. Since that time, that fund has grown to about $1.9 million. And in order to use those funds, there are several criteria that would allow you to use those funds, whether it be cleaning up pollution in the river. But ours, one of the areas that we're looking forward to be able to use those funds would be to develop and implement projects for improving beneficial uses of the Big Sioux River and public lands located along the Big Sioux River. And we believe the project from Falls Park to Keeling Community College on East 6th, developing that East Bank as part of our River Greenway plan would be an eligible use for those funds and a good use for those funds to continue on with the second phase of Greenway development. And so we wanted you to know that that's the proposed source of funding for that particular project, It's on page 124 of your CIP book. And, but there are some conditions as far as the approval process. We, in turn, would have to come back to the City Council, ask you to approve a resolution, but also that Minnehaha, Lincoln, and Lyon counties also need to approve the proposed plan prior to expending those funds. And then ultimately, it would go to the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of South Dakota, who originally set up the fund. And so wanted you to know that there's a little process that goes along with that, but our hope was that we could establish the CIP project, but ultimately it relies on other approval processes, including the counties and the district court. I wanted to remind everyone that our new shelter reservation fee, along with fee increases for those services that were well under our benchmarks, will go into effect January 1. And then due to decreased part-time salaries, this year we're really going to be relying on special event organizers and tournament organizers to help us with some of those costs associated with putting on those events. We've already been in that mode because our primary role, for example, in special events is trash removal. We have had event organizers this year already step up and help us to perform some of those services. And in 11 is probably going to be a larger role in order to help us balance our budget. But we also anticipate that field maintenance, additional dumpsters that are required for those events would be the responsibility of the organizing party. The other thing that's changed from our budget is our street tree removal program. These are for dead or diseased or dying trees in the right-of-way. We've had a program over the years that would go out and actually remove those trees. This program, the funds for that particular program have been removed from our budget, and that the responsibility for any dead or diseased tree in the right-of-way would be the responsibility of the property owner.
Don, earlier this, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Councilor Litz.
Don, thank you. Don, earlier this year, you removed, I think maybe it was last year, removed a huge tree across the street from my place because it had been hit by lightning and split down the middle, therefore becoming a safety concern. Would that also be removed under this?
No. The storm damaged trees is that we'll continue to go in and remove those hazards. That's a special circumstance in that particular case. We don't want a tree falling or a limb falling on a car or a tree or, heaven forbid, a person. And so we would continue to do that. We actually go around and do an inspection of the right-of-way. If we identify a dead tree, we'll put an X on it that says it's scheduled for removal, and then we'll just let the property know at that time. But in the storm damage case, we will continue to provide that service.
Okay, what you're talking about is the Blue X program, where the guys bid by the foot or the inch on the tree, and you took bids on it, and then they were removed in the fall time. Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
Don, how much did we remove out of that program? What was in that last year?
45. Actually, the total dollar amount in that fund is $60,000 in that line item. We did reserve $15,000 for those folks that don't remove the tree by the notice period, and then we have to hire a contractor to come in and remove them, and then it's assessed against their property at that point. But the total remove this year is $45,000.
Don?
Yes.
I hate to cut you off, but could you come back on the 23rd? Do you have time?
Sure.
I think just so we could wrap up the rest of our business and get ready for the other meeting, that might help the council. If you don't mind, if it works in your schedule, I think that'll be just fine. Help us.
At 3 or 4? Or?
I think it's at 3. It starts at 3.
3? Okay.
You'd be first.
Okay.
Yes, you'd be first, so.
Very good.
All right, thank you, Don.
Thank you.
If I could get a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of contract negotiations. I see a motion made by Councilor Rolfing. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Intiman. Let the record show that at 4:40 we went into executive session. Please, all those in the audience who aren't associated with this next item, please vacate the chambers. Thank you.